tab. There we go. Okay. Let's see, give it a sec here to come up on the thing. I think we're live. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the OpEI's live stream. We're got a really cool presentation for you guys tonight, along with the Q&A, like always. And we are joined tonight by Justin Ehrenhofer. I hope I said your last name correctly.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
There we go. That's always a good feeling. Well, yeah, thanks for being here, man. I know you're a big privacy advocate, supporter of Monero, and we are also both of those things. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know if you have a brief introduction or anything like that, but I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Matt. And thanks, Jill. It's great to have a call with the two of you for the first time. Of course, the two of you are doing great work to help support Monero and privacy and really cryptocurrencies generally. So it's really overdue, I feel, given how much involvement you've had for us to have a direct conversation together. So I hope that this is the start of this being a very regular thing. You're always invited to our Monero meets that we have once a week. So I'll be sending you invites. So awesome. Keep an eye there. Okay. Yeah. As I said, this is, I mean, I'll be watching the questions as they come in. I'll do a brief presentation. I'll run through it as quickly as I can while still covering everything on a high level. And then we'll have plenty of time to answer any questions you have. So let me get the screen share starting here. And yeah, okay, here we go. Cool. So yeah, today I'm talking on behalf of ComplyFirst about designing a compliance program for privacy preserving cryptocurrencies. Again, this is at a very high level. So background on me, I work for a cryptocurrency OTC desk for doing compliance specifically. We offer services in privacy preserving cryptocurrencies like Monero, like Zcash, like things people are familiar with. And ComplyFirst is an initiative that comes together that hopefully allows services to feel more comfortable supporting these assets because we feel they are very important for people to support. So we're an open industry initiative to support these privacy preserving cryptocurrencies and also to help people, exchanges, services feel comfortable using privacy preserving or handling cases of privacy preserving tools as well. So we really try to cover a broad array to get people comfortable with privacy and how to address these cases instead of everyone kind of throwing their hands up and not knowing what to do. So what do we put out? Well, on our website, complyfirst.org, we have compliance briefs. At the moment, these are around major coins. We have compliance guides, which really are actionable. We want them to be things people can use today and not just talk at a super high level that doesn't actually mean anything. We want it to be something people can actually start implementing today and include in their AML programs. We have presentations. There's 2 other ones that we have on our YouTube, on the ComplyFirst YouTube. Of course, this one's here. So thanks for watching this one. We also have external resources from our friends at Perkins Coie and Coin Center. These resources are all free. We don't ask for any information. You don't need to put your social security number in to get them. You just click download and they're there. So meant to be really accessible. Don't need to pay anything for them. They're all there. They're also living documents. So if you do have any feedback, let us know and we will incorporate them. So if you're interested in the feedback or helping us in any way, there is our contact information. Send us an email. So why do we even care about this topic at ComplyFirst? Well, privacy really isn't going away. Privacy on cryptocurrency makes a lot of sense. It's an open, decentralized system. Before we had cryptocurrencies, people already built open, decentralized systems for the benefit of privacy. You can think about networks like Tor, I2P, Freenet. It wasn't just like one of these that people were interested in. There were many of these built over the years. So when cryptocurrencies came around and made the idea of money on a decentralized system, it's understandable why people would want to have decentralized privacy, right? You don't want to trust any one entity to store your funds. So why would you want to trust any one entity to protect your privacy? That doesn't make sense. It would be much better to trust a whole distributed system. So a lot of people think as privacy is maybe something they can ignore when, something they don't need to focus about, it'll go away. But really over the past year, Monero transactions have tripled, Zcash fully shielded transactions have doubled, and Samurai mixing rounds in volume in BTC, which in USD would be even greater, have gone up 10 times. So you can see really like privacy is not going away. More and more people are using it, and even years into the game. And we expect this trend to really continue as people find more sophisticated ways and as tooling gets better for people to use privacy. You have to remember when Monero first launched, for example, and even through most of 2017, there was no GUI. Now we have GUIs, we have very easy to use mobile wallets. So things have really, really changed. So what is a privacy preserving cryptocurrency? Well, I'm going to divide it into two different types of categories. So for each row, I have one that's types of coins where the privacy is widespread for most, at least most of the transactions on the network, and another one where it's an opt-in feature. If someone goes out of their way, they tick a little box or something in order to have greater privacy. Then you have the columns. On the far left, you have projects where it's a big core focus of the coin. It's perhaps their identity. They're known as this being one of their major features. In the middle, you have ones that might have privacy sort of as a side benefit of doing something else, let's say. Maybe they want to make their transactions more efficient in the case of Mimblewimble, and that might also include checking the addresses out faster. So therefore, you may have some higher degree of privacy, but it's certainly not maybe the whole purpose of the coin, or maybe there's some other intent. And then you have other projects still on the right where privacy is a bit of a proposal, or it's on the application layer where you have to use a special wallet or something. It's not really super intrinsic to the consensus algorithm. Keeping in mind, this is a really, really rough table, but it's about as good as you're going to get on a super, super high level. So coins that are in the upper left are more likely to be considered privacy coins or privacy preserving cryptocurrencies. And those in the lower right are less likely. But ultimately, a lot of the elements that you have to deal with apply to all of these coins. It's not the case that you can, like, only Monero is subject to these potential AML regulations and things. Really, for Bitcoin, you may have a user that tries to take advantage of privacy. So you need to be prepared for that, right? So we try and prepare everyone for those cases. We actually have compliance briefs available for all the ones in green. So really all of them here except Litecoin right now. Although, of course, with Litecoin, you can treat it more like Bitcoin. The only difference is they may eventually add confidential transactions, which hides the amounts only to Litecoin at some point in the future. So that covers a bit of the idea that a privacy-preserving cryptocurrency is a bit of a hazy thing, more than people think. They like to classify a coin as either a privacy-preserving cryptocurrency or not, and we really believe that's the wrong way to look at it. Instead, what you really need to do is figure out what your customers and counterparties are doing, what activities are they doing, not so much what particular asset are they using, right? So let's meet the users of privacy coins, right? Well, privacy preserving features are used by quite a different potential array. If you have an opt-in feature, opt-in privacy feature, these are probably going to be only used by privacy fanatics, people who really want privacy and they're willing to make compromises for it. People who are doing illicit actions, right? If you're trying to launder money, you're definitely going to prefer to tick that privacy feature button, right? And then also outside researchers. You can think of these two as experts, perhaps. Those who really know what they're doing. They are really good at navigating and they have the skill to do so. So they're going to take advantage of the system because they know what to do. But if you implement it for everyone, you also include the whole broad array of all other cryptocurrency activity, which really is mostly related to other things. So you also add crypto nerds that just want to use crypto for whatever reason. They just think it's cool. You have speculators, right? Let's not kid ourselves. It's a cryptocurrency. Most people who use it are speculators, right? You have miners, especially in the case of Monero, or people who are staking. They're going to be using this feature if it's just enabled for them no matter what. Everyday users who are using it for whatever purpose. And of course, those who don't want to accidentally get tainted coins will use it also. Now, I also want to stress that this isn't just a bad actor who doesn't want their coins to be marked as tainted. It includes me, right? I'm receiving payment for anything. I don't want to receive tainted coins that will shut down my account for something I'm not even responsible for. So no one wants this additional risk. So they might prefer to transact in a more fungible asset that has more widespread privacy features. So really, when we talk about who actually uses privacy preserving features, you may only think about the users on the right, But ultimately, to some extent, even for opt-in features, it includes elements of everyone on the left there. And if something is widespread on the network, people could be using privacy for quite a few reasons, of course, on top of the fact that they just want privacy to begin with. So looking at a very quick case study, I'm not going to read all this text here, but Monero uses a CPU accessible mining algorithm. And someone might mine Monero because it's the only coin that they can mine with their computer. They might not even know that it provides more privacy than Bitcoin, but they still are covered in the types of users who would take advantage of the privacy feature. So make sure that, one thing ComplyFirst does when we speak to compliance professionals and regulators is help educate them in saying that just because someone uses a privacy feature doesn't mean that it necessarily means they even intended to use the privacy feature, right? They're not out there sleuthing, trying to necessarily pick the most secretive way of sending money because they want to be a nefarious actor. Really, for most people, it just means, hey, there's an investment opportunity here. I want to send funds between exchanges, or I want to mine, and boom, there you go. Now they're using the privacy feature. It really covers all these cases too. So we have to be really careful not to throw all these users under the bus also. So how do we deal with some risks that are related to not potentially knowing as much information about the source of funds that you would otherwise know if you had a very capable blockchain analytics tool, let's say? Well, let's take a step back first and do a quick reality check. I made this meme shortly before. I know it's maybe a little unprofessional for one of these talks, but I just think it really proves the point here. So let's compare the case at the moment. This is my personal opinion of how most cryptocurrency exchanges handle risk, right? You may have a user who has verified everything. They have handed over everything that you have asked for. They have given them your passport, maybe a second form of ID, phone number, social security number, occupation, utility bill. And then they're like, hey, I want to deposit $200 of Monero. And in the cryptocurrency community, for some reason, everybody loses their mind. They're like, oh, no, no, no. Heaven forbid you do that. That's not acceptable. You cannot do that, right? Well, on the other hand, what they're doing is they receive a deposit, let's say for $25,000 of ETH in someone's account that comes straight from a no KYC unregulated DEX, but it's on Uniswap. So it's all fancy, right? It has VC money, but it comes from this, that ultimately at the end of the day, these funds are traded and acquired without any KYC. And like, you don't know who this person is or where the source of funds actually are. But most cryptocurrency exchanges today are like, yeah, well, that's fine. We accept that level of risk. Let's ask more questions perhaps if we have them. But, come on in. Let's be the bouncer, come on in. So it's just interesting to me that, in the cryptocurrency industry, we've seen such a big difference in what we feel is the perception of risk versus reality of risk. Obviously, like you theoretically, I want to be very, very cautious here in my wording, but in theory, right, you could do a trade of $200 of Monero and not collect someone's ID in the US, and that might be completely fine. But, ultimately, at the end of the day, everyone's going to be worried about the potential risks here. And so they're going to go overboard and collect it, which to some extent we understand, but we want to make sure that we're not being so overzealous that we're completely completely forgetting what a risk-based approach is in an example like this case. So going through a reality check, right? Almost every single, actually, I won't even say the word almost, every single compliant cryptocurrency exchange has some form of blockchain analysis tool that they implement for Bitcoin, and usually for other coins too. And they will screen coins that you deposit, they'll screen coins that you withdraw, just to have some better understanding about what their customers and counterparties are using these funds for. And these are some examples of what risks these services might return for the funds you receive. And based off some feedback we received, it generally looks like this. So if you have a user send funds directly from Coinbase to Gemini, and if I'm Gemini, I might say, okay, this is a pretty low risk case. I know definitively they came from Coinbase. They've done their own KYC and stuff. This transaction's probably fine, or at least it's more likely to be fine than not fine. Then you also have something where it's unknown. We have no real previous history for this coin. Actually, based off our feedback, most people just treat that as either pretty good, At the most, they treat it like a case where someone deposits funds from a mixer, which they're more likely to consider as medium risk, depending on the situation. Cryptocurrency ATMs, also somewhere in the medium risk. A high risk exchange or darknet market is high risk. And then sanctions is something you definitely don't want to avoid. That you definitely want to avoid. That's flagged immediately. No one wants to touch that, right? So this is what the reality is and how most exchanges currently implement their systems. So if we really tried to fit how you would incorporate some privacy preserving cryptocurrencies and tools perhaps into this, I mean, we already have the mixer as a privacy preserving tool. You already know how to handle that case. That's where a user opted in to use a privacy feature. Well, I don't see why just the fact that someone used Monero, which would cover a broader array of activity, would potentially be reason to flag more risk than, you know, a Bitcoin mixer, let's say. It probably would be less risky. So this is our best fit at ComplyFirst and fitting this somewhere in. Monero and Grin are somewhere between the unknown and the mixer stage. Dash is actually just using a mixer. Bitcoin is using a mixer, so that does fit the definition pretty well. And Zcash fully shielded would fit in there pretty similarly, where, you know, a user has opted in to use a privacy feature, sort of like they had opted in to use a Bitcoin mixer, say. So this is, you know, where we would recommend thinking about certain risks, you know, in comparison to what you're already doing. So to add on to that, one thing that exchanges can do to really really conveniently reduce their risk is just say, okay, well, in order to trade privacy preserving cryptocurrencies, assuming we don't already feel comfortable implementing these in the AML risk-based approach we already have, we'll just bump it up to the next risk tier, right? You got to be tier 2 to deposit and withdraw Monero, let's say. And instead of being able to withdraw $100,000 like you can do with Bitcoin, we're going to limit it to $10,000 for Bitcoin, for Monero, let's say. I mean, obviously that has user experience drawbacks compared to a user potentially being able to deposit and withdraw of assets, and they might prefer to trade over that limit. At least you're giving them an option, right? At least you've made a decision here that's sensible, and you are offering the product, which is much better than not offering any sort of solution at the moment. You know, start small, start with what you're comfortable with, evaluate your risks. It's okay if you collect a little bit more information than you might need to just to begin with and figure out where your actual risks lie. Most cryptocurrency users are speculators. So I think you're going to find that, okay, most of our users are probably using this for, you know, the same purposes they're using Bitcoin for, let's say. But we do have this on our website, an example about how you can put it in a similar category that you would maybe cash, or you would otherwise have some additional information to know where the funds are coming from. That could be like a bank statement or any other number of ways where you could do that in order to better support these assets. And then if you do detect users that are doing something a little unusual, they're using a privacy feature that most people aren't doing. Let's say that the onboarded entity with you says that they're a cryptocurrency market maker, right? They're arbitrage trading across exchanges, and for some reason, all of the funds they send you are mixed. You're going to be like, that doesn't really fit the use case that they described. It doesn't really seem to fit their business. So in cases like that, we also have a questionnaire where you can always just ask more questions. We have this on our website. It walks through the sort of things you may want to ask a user if you don't have as much information about the source of funds as you perhaps would like, and this helps you fill in the gaps here. So there you go. Always can do enhanced due diligence if you really, really need to, if something looks suspicious. Really, really quick note in the funds travel rule. To those who are not aware, in the United States and most jurisdictions, there's this thing called the travel rule, which basically says if one institution is sending funds to another institution, you can think the same examples before. Coinbase sending funds to Gemini. That Coinbase is also supposed to share information about the customer with Gemini. That way they're able to pass information along and otherwise reduce risk. Well, our argument is, well, if you're already passing information about the sender, receiver, and the customer and purpose of the transaction, there really is no information that's obfuscated from these parties just because they're using a coin that is also hidden from the public, right? You can hide information from the public, but in the cases the travel rule applies, you already know who the real sender, receiver, amount, purpose, etc. of the transaction on. So it doesn't matter from these institutions' perspective if they're sending, Monero or Bitcoin or whatever asset, right? They still have all the information they need in order to be compliant. Ending here on where we sort of see things going in the next 1 year, maybe 2 years in certain cases. But ultimately, this is our view of the next year, mostly focused on Monero, because I know that was a big purpose of the conversation today. So in the ecosystem, we see these 4 big changes happening. At least this is what we see with ComplyFirst. So 1, we see a huge increase in unregulated Monero decentralized exchange infrastructure. I'll talk about some of those projects that are in play right now. Illicit actors adopted Monero in a big way in 2020. So that's something regulators will have to make sure that they're adapting to. Currency transaction reports, or CTRs, are coming to cryptocurrencies. And Triptych is closer than you think. This will bump Monero's privacy features. So let's quickly go through all 4 of these, and then we'll open up for questions. Again, plenty of time for questions. So first, huge increase in unregulated Monero DEX infrastructure. There's a Monero CCS proposal recently that was funding something called Farcaster. This is an unofficial logo, but I still think it looks cool. We'll see what they eventually choose. This allows people to atomic swap between Bitcoin and Monero, which means that they don't need to go through a regulated institution in order to swap these 2 assets. Now, in practice, there are some real limitations here why someone might not want to do this, right? If you have Bitcoin and it's tainted, you might want to sell it to an unsuspecting Monero user, right? Similarly, if you have Monero, you might not want to swap it for what could be tainted Bitcoin. If you buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, however, you're not going to get tainted Bitcoin. So there certainly is an incentive to trade on an exchange if that option is available. But the Monero community has shown that, if people can't trade on exchange, they're going to trade off exchange where it's not a covered regulated activity at the moment. Similarly, you have exchanges like BTSE, which is located outside of the United States and does not onboard US customers. However, US customers can still otherwise find ways to possess this asset and exchange it on Ethereum's built out decentralized exchange architecture. So that will continue. And I think that there will be increasingly like a large market for no KYC ways to swap between Monero and wrap Monero so that they can go and otherwise participate in the Ethereum ecosystem. So these projects, to some extent, are already here, right? You can already trade Monero on BISC, for example. But the infrastructure really seems to be ramping up now and over the next year, so that if exchanges are not going to capture Monero's volume and growth, it will move to a lot of these, either offshore exchanges that are less compliant or underground where users are directly trading with themselves and regulators don't have access to really any info. Second, illicit actors adopted Monero in a big way in 2020, right? We can talk about ransomware and darknet markets, I think. So at the beginning of 2020, very few ransomware payments were made in Monero, like very, very few. I mean, I'm sure some, but not much. Now, like some sources tell me that Monero is approximately in their view, like a $1 billion per year approximate, again, like industry. I don't even know how to describe this, but like about $1 billion of ransomware payments in their estimation are now paid in Monero instead of Bitcoin. Bitcoin continues to be the largest ransomware payout option, but in 2020, Monero was used in a way it certainly had never really been used before. And we don't expect that trend to slow down, especially as liquidity builds up and the spreads narrow for Monero. Also, darknet markets really switched to be either Monero only or at least were Monero preferred within 2020. And so it's really uncertain at this point what ratio of payments on darknet markets are Bitcoin to Monero. Like maybe it's close to 50-50. I don't have a great assessment over that, but ultimately, it's really come around. So this is the exact sort of information that regulators, investigators want to capture, right? They want to learn information about these transactions, which have historically occurred, predominantly on Bitcoin, continue to mostly be done on Bitcoin. But things really change in 2020, and regulators are totally ill prepared to address these challenges because they don't really have much information, because many people are not trading Monero on regulated exchanges. they're trading on exchanges that are outside of the US that might not be sharing information with FinCEN and the like. Third thing, CTRs are coming. This enforces standards. So basically, the Monero Policy Working Group, which is in some ways is similar to ComplyFirst, but also is definitely Monero focused. They actually responded to FinCEN supporting the CTR implementation, which is different than the rest of the cryptocurrency industry, really. With CTRs, however, the Monero community supported them because it makes the risks of cryptocurrencies, even private cryptocurrencies like Monero, to be similar risk to cash. And it implements a reporting and record-keeping requirement that is proven and effective and well understood for cash right now. It just carries that over to work with cryptocurrencies. And there's less of a, oh, I don't know what to do. No, you're prescribed to do this, and everyone gets more information, and everything is more effective in carrying out investigations. So most others in the cryptocurrency community did not take on such a favorable view to these, like the Monero Policy Working Group. But at this point, most people have come around, and by the end of the comment period, I believe that almost every cryptocurrency exchange that's regulated will actually support these CTRs. Partially as a result from the fact that Bitcoin was used to fund a lot of the capital coup attempt that really has sparked things in regulators, and I expect them to fully implement something, most likely the CTRs, over the next few months. So this actually works in Monero's favor because it makes it such that there's a standard method of addressing risk that you have for all cryptocurrencies, including Monero. And then, of course, you have Triptych, right? Triptych is a zero-knowledge proving system, which zero knowledge is used incorrectly by pretty much everybody. Does not have any relation to what actual privacy protections you get. So it's a little side rant there. But it effectively allows Monero's ring size to be bumped from its current 11 to more realistic numbers like 64 or 128, or theoretically something like 1024. So really more privacy is coming to Monero, potentially within the next 12 months, but we'll have to see. Triptych is closer than you think, but also it hasn't been implemented in like a very clear strategy for rollout as of today, although we're really pushing to get this in safely, but also methodically, so that we're always moving the ball forward to provide Monero users with a very strong degree of privacy protections. So those are the big developments that are occurring that really, in our opinion, this is ComplyFirst's recommendation to regulators. We believe that instead of regulators sort of talking about exchanges only in terms of the risks they need to address in handling these privacy preserving cryptocurrencies, and thus causing them to probably be delisted based off of like lower risk that the exchanges don't want to deal with, we feel regulators instead should actively encourage financial institutions to list these privacy preserving cryptocurrencies in order to bring the current and future underground activities into regulator view. At the moment, especially with Monero, a lot of activity is done underground. It's not done on regulated US exchanges because there only is one major US exchange that supports it, which is Kraken. If that was much more widely implemented, Monero transactions would be much closer to regulator view. If someone was engaging in illicit activities, regulators would have a much better oversight and much better, insight into these transactions than they otherwise would. So we actually imagine regulators, once they realize that Monero and privacy isn't going away, they'll make changes in order to be as close to those payments as possible, which means working with banks, institutions, etc., to support these assets. So final slide here, main takeaways. Privacy technologies exist for all cryptocurrencies. Again, this isn't just a Monero Zcash problem. If you provide services related to Bitcoin right now and Ethereum, you need to deal with people trying to use the network in ways that give them privacy. You have to do that today. There's no way around that. You've already accepted that risk. So you already are somewhat familiar, at least I hope, in addressing these. The use of privacy-preserving cryptocurrencies and tools may present some additional AML risks, but these can be mitigated through many different strategies. You can apply your tier-based verification in a sensible way that doesn't freak out if someone tries to sell $1 of Monero, right? Collect AML information on onboarding that you can give to regulators. If someone does something suspicious, you can always ask them more questions and report it, right? If someone does something suspicious and has a very bad explanation, by all means, report it. If someone does something that you believe initially is suspicious, but they have a really good explanation and have really good proof for what they're doing, maybe you'll feel comfortable about the relationship as a result. You can always ask. We believe that supporting these assets is actually really, really important for users and businesses, because at the end of the day, it's nonsensical to have every single transaction be a permanent public record. Like, that starting point is insane to begin with. It should be the case that exchanges are able to learn information about their customers, but the initial base case, the assumption we take that this is all public information and should be public, is insane. It is crazy, and it is not sustainable. And then finally, regulators should encourage exchange adoption to lower AML risks overall. And we believe that this will help not just, the privacy preserving cryptocurrencies, of course, because they want to have, I want these services to be more used and have more liquidity. I want people to have the privacy they deserve. But this is a really good midpoint where users get the privacy if they want to, withdraw it like they would cash and use it for their everyday payments. But also, if there are cases of, substantial money laundering, terrorist financing, and the like, exchanges do have information that they can report if a user does something that's illegal. So if you have any questions, you can ask them. There's our website, there's our info. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and get to answering all these really good questions that came in. So let's get started on those.
Okay, yeah, awesome. And I think before we hop into the chat questions, I don't know, Chill, did you have any? I want to give you a chance to ask Justin a few questions if you had some. And then I had a couple, and then I think we'll pass it over to the chat maybe at that point. I think you're still muted, Chill.
I may have some questions, but let's have Justin answer the.
Okay. Okay. Just one thing real quick. I really love that presentation. I just want to give a little personal background here. Like, I've been into Monero for a few years now. And I mean, like, ethically and morally, I really support the privacy preserving nature of it. But I always had that thought in the back of my head, like, well, I wonder how the regulators and the centralized exchanges are going to, view this stuff. And I just didn't know, like, is it possible for them to be compliant? Or is it just so, is it so out there that they're just going to have to make it illegal and only Bitcoin and Ethereum and the, 100% transparent chains are going to be, what people use? And for me, that was a lot of unknowns. But I think what your presentation sort of demonstrated was that it's actually not that hard to be compliant, like to treat this stuff like cash. It's not really like the tools are there. People just have to, do them and use them. And so, yeah, that was kind of my main takeaway from that. So I was good stuff. That made I'll sleep better tonight.
Good. I'm glad that we're able to make people sleep better at night. That's what we try and do.
Cool. Well, yeah, let's see here. So first question, well, that was actually from earlier, was asking about Grayscale. I'm not sure. Do you know what I don't know. Is that the one where I thought that was the mining group that was going to like start censoring transactions for Bitcoin or something, that like Bitcoin mining pool, but maybe Grayscale is something different than that. I don't know.
Sure. Maybe. I mean, I can speak about the Grayscale news today. It's very timely, right? This came out today because Grayscale filed just yesterday, I believe. However, Grayscale is a company. I believe it's owned by the Digital Currency Group, DCG, and they allow institutional investors a mechanism of investing in a fund without actually holding the actual crypto, right? For whatever reason. There's many reasons at the moment why big players in the industry either don't want to or can't touch crypto itself. They only need to talk through more regulated investment options. And Grayscale provides a mechanism for doing that. For example, if you wanted to invest your funds in your IRA or whatever, it's very, very difficult to purchase Bitcoin itself to hold in your IRA. It's very, very difficult. It's much easier to just tell your broker to like, hey, buy this for me, and they can include it in their account. So they announced for Monero and for a few other coins that they had created trust companies, and I believe they created trust companies that is a step forward. It's not a commission, they haven't committed to this, but it's a step forward in terms of offering new products so that people can invest in these shares. They already have one for Zcash, they have one for Bitcoin, they have one for Ethereum. Obviously the Bitcoin and Ethereum ones are the most subscribed. So it's good news, right? Because it signals that a large player that is regulated, and it's a trust company, they felt comfortable enough with Monero to go forward and take an affirmative step in that direction in terms of offering these services, right? And they've already done it with Zcash. So it shows to me that they at least somewhat feel that there's a demand for these things. People want to buy Monero. Institutions want to have a new way of buying it. And it also means that they've probably done some form of compliance analysis to make sure that they're not signaling a total train wreck, which obviously I feel that they're not, right? And they already do support Zcash. So they've probably already spoken with regulators about these very sorts of things. So it is a positive step for Monero, in my opinion, because it shows, hey, there's interest. Hey, they don't see Monero and freak out, because if they did, they wouldn't have done this. So it's reassuring. And I hope not only that people feel excited that there, potentially will be a new product offered for people who want to invest in Monero, of course, indirectly, but, still somewhat reliant on Monero's price. But also that I hope it gives comfort to people to say, yes, these regulated institutions are comfortable announcing certain moves to support these assets and are comfortable with that. So it's good news.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. That's good stuff. Cool. And oh yeah, Lion Richie said that's exactly what I was getting at. Great answer. So nice. Let's see here. So the other one. Do legitimate crypto exchanges evaluate the complete history of transactions associated with all deposits of the crypto all deposits of crypto assets? So are they doing chain analysis on every single anything deposited into their exchange, like everything? And yeah, I don't know. Are you able to speak to that?
Yeah, so in my experience, to the best of my knowledge, every, especially retail focusing, and by retail, I mean, you can think of as normal end user, normal exchange customer. So an everyday person that onboards with an exchange will most likely have every deposit and withdrawal they make with cryptocurrency exchanges be evaluated with some form of chain analysis software. If it's built up correctly, they will be flagged the instant you make any actions, with any of those connected addresses, as soon as it's identified. And the way that I know there's a lot of confusion with this. It doesn't really have to do with however many hops away it is. That's really a misnomer. Elliptic has a webinar that's out, for example, that describes this a little bit more in detail. So you can seek that out about why the number of hops is not used in the industry really. But the idea is they want to know what the history of funds is since the last identified entity. So if day one, Bitcoin is mined, right? Oh, look, it's a new fresh minted Bitcoin. And then let's say for some reason someone mixes it. So now it might be tagged as, related to mixing. And then someone sends it to a darknet market. And then someone withdraws it from a darknet market. So now it's tagged as darknet market. And then it's sent to Coinbase. So now you can think of it as all the previous history is wiped, right? So Coinbase, when they receive the deposit, will say, oh, look, someone sent us funds from a darknet market because that's the most recent identified wallet. And so they'll probably question the user. But Coinbase gets these funds, they send them to another user who's withdrawing. It might be the same output, right? They might take this output, use that output to generate a new one, but to everyone else in all the other cryptocurrency exchanges, they, assuming the tool they're using is worth any good, which usually it is, but who knows what people make. What normally happens, what happens 99% of the time is that if that user withdraws those funds from Coinbase, then deposits them at Gemini, let's say, Gemini would say, oh, look, these funds came most recently from Coinbase. And they'll be like, yep, looks good. So it's not the case that it goes back forever to the case where everything's tainted at some point. They only care about your interactions with the most recent known entity, which usually is an exchange. You know, most cryptocurrency transactions are very, very close to an exchange. I know a lot of people like to think about most users always self-custodying their own funds and not often touching exchanges. I mean, the reality is the vast majority of cryptocurrency transactions are like 1 or 2 transactions away from an exchange. So it actually means that this tooling is quite effective in most cases.
Well, is it fair to say that for now, they're only looking at like the last previously known identified wallet, but potentially in the future, I mean, that could change to where it's like an actually like colored coin where like this is a tainted Bitcoin forever and ever. It came from Iran or something like that. I mean, is that possible, or is that not really the way you see the regulation going? I mean, that's kind of a crystal ball question, but.
Yeah, no, I think it makes sense. Like it's theoretically possible. You definitely can do that. I don't think, I mean, I actually do think regulators are well informed enough, and that's why the tools are designed in this way already. At least the vast majority of tools, again, any of them that are worth anything are designed this way already. And I don't actually expect that changing. Almost everyone understands that if I'm a Coinbase user and I withdraw funds from Coinbase, it matters that those coins came from Coinbase. It doesn't matter where Coinbase got those funds from. So that's pretty universally understood. To give an example, however, the United States has issued sanctions on specific Bitcoin addresses and other addresses. So it might be the case that an address starts off by holding, I don't know, $1 million in there, $1 million worth of Bitcoin. And one of the deposits to that exchange address might have been for $10,000. And the US says that $10,000 is related to sanctions. And so this wallet is related to sanctions. Well, most regulators are smart enough too to say, okay, well, obviously the whole million isn't bad, right? They'll work with the exchange to deal with that wallet, but it doesn't mean that every time someone withdraws funds from that exchange that they have sanctioned funds, right? So again, any tool that is worth anything should incorporate that. And honestly, already tools are pretty good at doing that. I've seen very rare instances where tools don't work very well in that case. But if you just stick to any of the names you've probably heard of, they know how to address these challenges already.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Chill, I think you're muted. Were you going to say something? Still muted. Sorry. There we go.
I said not only that, but now that we're seeing adoption, I just simply can't see like merchants using Bitcoin because every customer would be walking around with an open wallet. It just poses a security risk. So I think like in terms of mass adoption, I can only see some privacy coins being used for commerce.
That's a really, really good point. So I made that exact point at a Bitcoin conference that Andreas organizes. The last one in person was August 2019. It was in Denver. My talk is on YouTube. If no one finds it, I'll give you, it finds it by the time we're done with this and puts it in the live stream. I'll give you the link to put in the video notes or whatever. But I make the point that if coins don't have fungibility, right? You as a merchant are putting yourself at potential liability by accepting funds without doing chain analysis on them. If you receive, like, I could say, hey, I'll give you a free Bitcoin, pull out your wallet, I'll send it straight to you, right? It doesn't mean actually that you can send this Bitcoin anywhere. Like, what if in the worst case, I send you sanctioned Bitcoin, right? The network would approve it, it would go through, it would show up in your wallet, but you can't put that on an exchange, right? What are you going to do with it? So yeah, it's very, very difficult to use a non-fungible asset as settlement currency if you're a merchant. And in fact, I recommend it if you want to mitigate your risk, which honestly any sensible business should. They need to use like a payment processor that has it built in, which is sad because, right, there's no technical reason why you need a payment processor, right? If your intent is to receive Bitcoin, you could just receive Bitcoin without a middleman, but you may want a middleman because you want to make sure the funds aren't tainted that you receive. It's just insane. And so without fungibility, we aren't really doing as much to get outside of this intermediated world as people may have expected.
No, fungibility is a huge deal, and that's
For currency.
What's that?
Sorry, go ahead. No, I mean, currently, if you go to a store, you go to Walmart, for example, no one knows how much money is on you. You just purchase something, but no one actually sees what's in your wallet. And with all Bitcoin or all of these public blockchains, I mean, people could see how much money you have on you at any given time. And you could go to like Venezuela, buy a cup of coffee, and get robbed as soon as you left the store.
Yeah. No, and I think too with like people, sharing their information that they have, they own cryptocurrency, and you're kind of making it easier for people to identify that they do own it. I think we might see some more like the old, what do they call it, like the wrench attacks on people, where you just kind of beat the private keys out of them, and the fungibility and privacy is a huge deal in that case. I mean, it's people's actual safety can potentially be at risk. So it's it's a big deal. I mean, that's why we like Monero. But so you'd mentioned kind of on the fungibility track, you'd mentioned like a mixer, and I mean, I'm familiar with them. But can you just, for everybody out there who's maybe not, like, what's a mixer? What's a tumbler? Are they the same thing? And what do they do? What are they used for?
Sure. So a mixer is an interactive method. Keyword interactive, whereby several users come together. They will pool their funds together through some means, usually in the case of specially crafted transactions, in order to make it ambiguous what the real source of funds are and what the destination addresses are. So you might, for example, everyone starts out, let's say, with 1 Bitcoin. They all have their own set of past histories and the like. And then there'll be a single transaction, usually, where all these funds come together and they're all spent, like, sort of distributed among a bunch of other outputs. So it's unclear what the real source of funds was. Like, if you result in these funds, which source of funds was originally yours? And people sometimes try to repeat that several times. The most common Bitcoin mixing method that we see, and the ones that I'd be most likely to recommend, are like Samurai wallets and the way that they've implemented things. Wasabi wallet is also relatively commonly used. People sometimes talk about centralized Bitcoin mixers. That would be the case where I would run a website, for example, which I don't, clearly, because that'd be very bad. But if I did, I would say, send me a bunch of funds, and then I'll craft those transactions for people. That really isn't commonly used anymore for counterparty risk reasons, and also because using a no KYC exchange is really better in every way for achieving what you wanted to do there. So that's the idea of mixing. I want to make clear that that's very different than what Monero does. A lot of people sometimes falsely make a comparison between ring signatures and mixing. These really are not the same at all, mostly because with Monero, it's non-interactive. You aren't working with people in order to put funds together and craft transactions in certain ways. You are looking at the blockchain, which you could do offline, generating a transaction and then sending it out. You're not actually coordinating with anybody. So it is a very different process. But that's what mixing is. People sometimes use it, and people increasingly are using it for Bitcoin as the tooling gets better. I mean, it's still very bad user experience in my opinion, but certainly better than it used to be, and it's more effective than it used to be.
It's more effective. Okay, that's interesting. And I mean,
yeah, and I want to stress quickly. You mentioned the prompt of that discussion was on fungibility. Like a lot of people view fungibility as the idea that, if I receive, they think about it this way, like if I either have or receive tainted coins, could I potentially mix them or use some privacy feature to make it ambiguous and get away with using coins and make them like not tainted, right? That's how a lot of people view fungibility. To some extent, I get it, but to a larger extent, I don't really think it's right. And the reason is that not everything is a cookie cutter clean case where every time you receive a payment, it's to a new Bitcoin address that's not on an exchange and it's completely buried somewhere and no one else knows it's even tied to you, right? To the point where I accept Bitcoin donations, let's say, and I put a Bitcoin donation address on my website. And it's a public website, right? And maybe I have it set up that every time I see a donation that shows there, I generate a new address and put a new address there, right? Well, the second people see, oh, this Bitcoin address you had attributed to you received these funds, right? It's already a question about what funds I'm receiving, even if I try and mix them later down the line and inject them into the rest of the monetary system later. Like, I just think it's too narrow to think about it only as I've received tainted coins. How do I make them not tainted? And if I can do that, then it's fungible enough. No, I really like to think about fungibility as the idea that you can receive funds and there is no additional suspicion on top of whatever the original reason for the transaction was. That's a much more inclusive and a much better goal that I think is more useful for most people.
I would agree, for sure. Okay, cool. Yeah, great answer. So let's see here. I'm going to combine a couple of these. So talking about regulation, or which regulators are driving the boat on regulating crypto assets, and then also are any of these potential regulations? Okay, so yeah, it's basically a two-part question. So do you see any regulation coming out that's going to affect cryptocurrency, this year or in the near future? And do you think that regulation might be focused on privacy, preserving cryptocurrencies and affect them more than it might the more transparent ones?
Sure. So yes, we the industry at this point does fully expect FinCEN to put out new requirements for cryptocurrencies. I mentioned those CTRs. I do fully expect, it's not a requirement right now, but I do fully expect that by the end of the year, cryptocurrency exchanges are going to be required to report information on all deposits and withdrawals to what they call unhosted wallets, but you can think of as like a self-custody wallet instead. That's the preferred language from our point of view. If a user does that, it will be reported, and that so FinCEN will get information about that transaction. You can see what specific information they want, and there are some debates going on there. But honestly, at the end of the day, what it really does is it gives a user a better reason to use Monero. Because if they're not using Monero, it means that chain analysis is like far more effective if they're seeing, you know, reports of, oh, a user withdrew this amount of money. And, you know, it gives users a better reason to use an asset that has privacy, just because, you know, there's a lot of external information that will also be shared, even if it's, you know, even if the industry attempts successfully to limit some of this information. I mean, there's no reason you couldn't transact in a privacy-preserving cryptocurrency, so you might as well should, right? You get better features otherwise. So I don't see anything at the moment, or foresee anything at the moment, that is really targeted as like an additional requirement on privacy-preserving cryptocurrencies themselves. I think that if it would come out, I think it would most likely be at the recommendation of someone who's knowledgeable and would advocate for a very sensible, specific thing. So not something, for example, like requiring view keys. That's absurd. That's a horrible user experience, right? No one should ever do that. But saying something like, oh yeah, we need to have like one additional type of proof of address, or sorry, proof, like fund type document, like maybe that's more up for negotiation, and regulators might, you know, toss some ideas with the industry and we'll figure out something that makes sense. I do somewhat have faith in that. You know, certain groups are interested in privacy preserving cryptocurrencies and technologies at the moment. These include like the Blockchain Association, Coin Center, a few others. And so I mean, the thing is, like, up to this point, it really, you know, privacy has not really been any particular US cryptocurrency exchange's main agenda item for the year. And I think now the Monero community is a bit more organized in terms of reminding people like, hey, we're here and we're pretty large and we have a large community and you need to make sure that you're addressing us in rulemaking. I actually do feel that, you know, FinCEN has done this to a pretty substantial extent, far better than many jurisdictions could or have. A lot of jurisdictions have handled it far worse and will definitely need to walk back at some point. But yeah, I guess to circle back and answer that question more broadly, yes, I do expect there to be new regulations come out. However, no, I do not have any pulse on anyone feeling like it's sensible to do like an all-out assault on privacy preserving cryptos or anything. Everyone seems to understand that they can't just ban these things, right? Like, even though it would be really bad for Monero's liquidity in the short term if they said, Kraken, you can't trade this anymore, right? No matter what, you got to remove it. Everyone's going to be trading through some other no KYC exchange that just isn't blocking US IPs. And that's just what's going to happen. And then Farcaster is going to come out and then everyone's going to use that. And then good luck telling people, oh, now let's go back on a centralized exchange when they already are used to trading on this system where they don't need to hand over this information. So I do actually think regulators get that. And that's a conversation that we've had many times actually with FinCEN, and they definitely have been good as far as we've been able to tell at hearing out industry and hearing what they have to say. And they really aren't idiots. They're not here to ban things arbitrarily, like I know is the commonly perception. And even for the DOJ report, which I want to talk about that really quickly, actually. Okay. So the DOJ put out like a research paper on the potential risks relating to cryptocurrencies. And they included some of the strongest language focusing on, FinCEN and Treasury and, DOJ, that they usually refer to these as anonymity enhancing cryptocurrencies, or AECs. We feel privacy preserving is a better phrase, but they use AEC. And they said something, I don't know if I remember the exact quote anymore, but the subject is very, very correct here. It just says, like, the use of AECs is indicative of, or possibly indicative of, money laundering and terrorist financing. And like, cash meets that description, Bitcoin meets that description, right? So for them to single that out in particular is pretty aggressive. And the discussions I've had on the side, it seems like they didn't intend for it to be so they're taken as so harsh and for the industry to react so harshly, but they actually did. It was actually kind of funny. Like ransomware payments in Monero were down that week when everyone was like, oh goodness, we don't want to pay in Monero, right? Scrap that idea. So it actually did have a tiny bit of an effect, but it also freaked everyone out. And I think, I think it shows why regulators, at least I hope that they understand why they can't just talk about the fears about certain risks without also saying, no, but we do also want you still to support these things. We're not trying to threaten to put you out of business if you do, right? Like it's the case. We want you to be prepared if we have questions on these, but we're willing to work with you on these. And we still want you to support these assets so that we have information on them. I want it to be more of that type of conversation. And I actually do think we're closer on that end than most people might think. Certainly very different than the perception in the cryptocurrency industry.
Yeah.
It is so, I'm sorry, I'm ranting here for a while now, but it's just so funny that, you know, let's say the OCC might put out a statement saying, banks, you are allowed to use cryptocurrencies for this purpose, right? They may say that. And then the cryptocurrency community takes this and they say, oh, I know they said cryptocurrency, but certainly they did not mean any privacy preserving cryptocurrency. Like no way could that apply. There's literally no way it'll be banned, right? That latter is more what the opinion seems to be in the industry, which I just have not seen at all in my conversations with regulators. They seem, I mean, sure, there is an enforcement aspect, but I do not see it anywhere close to that, like most people might perceive.
So yeah, so to them, is it fair to say, I mean, to them, just like cryptocurrency is cryptocurrency, whether it's privacy preserving or it's transparent, they both kind of are approaching it in similar ways. Is that fair to say?
I would say they try to. I think, you know, there are going to be stumbles along the way. For example, I think the DOJ's paper was an example of a stumble where they didn't mean for, at least to my knowledge, they didn't mean for the wording to be so aggressive, but it came across that way. And so I would treat it as a sort of stumble that I hope we're able to work with regulators to avoid in the future, so we don't prematurely freak people out. But I mean, the regulators aren't really here. There are a lot smarter people in the regulatory body space than most people probably give credit. And they, at least in the Monero community, the perception compared to perceptions there. So no one really is out there being like, we should just kill Monero, because they know they can't. They know that's a nonsensical position. So they're willing to, you know, come to some other thing that's best for everyone. And in their minds, like they want everyone transacting with all the privacy they want, as long as in cases where they want to investigate things, they can. And I think the best middle point is, you know, when someone touches a regulated exchange, you have risk controls in place, but users can still go out and, you know, trade on a DEX if they want to, or they can go out and not have everything be a permanent public record, right? We need to be careful in weighing these things, and even the regulators get that.
Oh man, that's good to know. Yeah, like I said, I'll sleep easier tonight.
Yeah, I mean, you talk to some of these people sometimes and you're like, goodness, it's such a scare, right? But in most cases, it just isn't really reality, especially in the US.
Cool, right on. All right, I think that's most of the chat questions. Chill, if you're ready, I'll throw it over to you. And
yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, and I really share the sentiment with Matt. You know, I mean, this work is very important. I feel like, you know, if it's just being brushed under the carpet, then we're just going to create a safe space for criminals and illicit activities, and then, you know, later on regulators can turn around and say, see, I told you so. But whereas, you know, the very action of delisting Monero is what will initiate this process. So for the better or worse. So yeah, I really love your work. Thank you so much, and appreciate your time to talk to us tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chill and Matt. Like I said, you're always welcome on the Monero Meets.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll continue to see you
Yeah.
in Monero community discussions, because it's just an open thing. Like I was just an 18-year-old that was interested in Monero and just kind of stuck with it. But
Nice.
anyone who has a passion can jump in and contribute. So strongly encourage that. Is even on the regulatory side, people have really good ideas, and bounce them off each other, figure something out.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, the space is what everybody who's participating in it makes it, and it's going to go whichever direction everybody sort of collectively decides to move in. And so far, it's been super exciting. I mean, the last 3 years of being in cryptocurrency and contributing to the space is like some of the most interesting times of my life. So it's fun. It looks like things are starting to pick up a little bit more of awareness now, and with all the crazy stuff going on in the world politically and even today financially in the markets and like all of that stuff, it's like, I don't know, maybe I'm a little biased, but it seems like, like these decentralized networks that allow everybody to sort of coordinate and move value around seem like they could offer some sort of help to a lot of things people are complaining about, but time will tell, I suppose.
We shall see, but
yep.
We're going to be here arguing our case to anyone who will listen, and we're going to do our best to make sure it's a sensible case.
All right, man, that's awesome. Yeah, you're doing the Lord's work. Keep it up.
All right. Thank you so much, Chill and Matt. This is great.
Yeah. Anytime. Like I said, we'll it's mutual. So I think Chill. Should I wrap it there? Should we wrap it there?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So lastly, just before everybody bounces out, again, this is brought to you by the Open Economy Initiative. That's Chill and I, and we're just on a mission to promote crypto commerce through education. And to that end, we've got 2 courses out there that'll show you how to buy Bitcoin, move it to a hardware wallet for safekeeping, and then also how to kind of play around with DeFi on Ethereum, get started there. If you want to check those out, that's over at the OpEI.com. And we're joined by Justin Ehrenhofer today from ComplyFirst and a bunch of other stuff. And I think that'll wrap it. So thanks again, Justin, and we'll talk with you soon, I'm sure.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Yep. See ya. Thanks. All right.